There we go. Hey, everybody, welcome to this session this afternoon. We're going to be talking about VCF bundles and licensing. Shana, give me a quick check. Am I live? All right, good. Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Definitely can find our recordings if they're on YouTube. We post these afterwards, and reach out to our team. They do an awesome job. They'll answer all your questions. Okay, that's a wrap. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.